Good afternoon, Rhody Nation. We're back. Another week, another episode of Mark's Remarks. Mark Radigan here on WRIU 90.3 FM Kingston. New show today, and this is going to be a first for the show. We have never had a member of the Rhode Island Sailing team come on the show. Sailing is a sport that, to be totally honest with you, I have very little knowledge about. I just don't know that much. I know my mom has a better understanding of sailing than I do, as she sailed when she was younger, but I don't know very much about it. All I know much about sailing is coming into URI, that it's a big sport around here, obviously given the location, the geography, being right on the ocean and stuff. So I knew it was popular, and I've learned a little bit about it, but I still know very little. So I thought that today would be a good day to get a little lesson on the sport for you guys all to learn alongside me. So today in the studio, I'm joined by Leah Rickard, a member of the URI sailing program, one with a little bit of an interesting story to tell. So Leah, how are you doing today?
I'm great, Mark. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. I'm fairly excited to learn about a little bit about what you do, because I mean, we were talking a little bit before the show. You were giving me a little bit of a rundown about your experiences in sailing and just what the sport is like for you. And it's really not like any other sport that I've ever covered before, and it seems to be quite an intense and demanding sport. So, I mean, just without further ado, I want to get right into it. Tell me, how does one get into the sport of sailing? How does one get into a sport like this?
That is a great question, and honestly, there are so many different ways you can interpret sailing. Like, there's competitive sailing, there's recreational sailing, there's paddleboarding, which isn't really sailing, but people like to call it that. But me, I've grown up competitive sailing basically my whole life. So it all started back in Miami, Florida. I learned how to sail in Coral Reef Yacht Club, and I have two older brothers. One is 4 years older than me. One is 1 year older than me. We actually have the same birthday, which is really cool. February 12th. And so basically we learned how to sail there, and we were on Biscayne Bay, which is absolutely beautiful. But if any sailors know, Biscayne Bay has zero wind all the time. I don't know if there's a lot of sharks now, but there used to be, so it was kind of scary. And I learned on that when I was probably 8 years old. I learned with my brothers. They were the most awesome teachers for me. I've learned so much, but I learned basically how to race, how to just, in general, how do I fit in a boat? How do I steer the boat? What am I doing? At the beginning, I was petrified. Right now, I'm currently 5'4", and when I was 8 years old, I was probably like 3'9". Like, I was tiny. I was always a small kid, and so you get these like massive wind days, and I'm so scared, and I'm like, how the hell am I going to be, keeping my boat flat? Like, this boat is called an Opti. It's a dinghy, the smallest boat I would say that sailors competitively sail. And I was in this boat, and I am tiny, We go out sailing, and then what do you know? It's Miami, Florida. There's thunderstorms. And this is like a very vivid memory that I have. And you have, you're sailing along, and then 1 minute later, there's just this massive thundercloud coming over you, right? And then all of a sudden, the Opti is made out of pure metal, and there's literally a metal pole sticking in the air, and that's called your sprit. But that doesn't really matter. Anyway, a metal pole in the air, thunderstorm coming. That's just like the worst idea ever. 2 seconds later, I see lightning strike my sail, and it is ripped, and I am crying. I don't know what to do. I'm panicking. Everyone's just like, what are we doing? Like, we're all like 8 years old. This is like insane. And my coach is like, that wasn't thunder. We're going in, because, the coach has to calm everyone down and not actually tell them they were about to die. So we all get, towed in and stuff. And I was like, okay, that's literally, I'm never going out again. What am I doing? The next day I'm out again, I love it. The sailing, the thrill of it, all of it, it's awesome. Okay. So to me, sailing is something that anyone can do and anyone can get into. And the competitive side just depends if you've been really immersed in the sport, and if you really want to start getting mad at people for no reason just because they're better than you. That's what I think competitive sailing is. But so competitive sailing basically involves racing sailboats against another sailboat, mainly in the same category. So for like dinghies, it would be opties versus opties. Then a little more like lasers would be lasers versus lasers. Thankfully, the Olympics does host sailing, so I hope a lot of people kind of know what sailing is. But I believe that it requires skill in sailing techniques, understanding the wind and weather, as well as conditions, strategic decision making, a lot of teamwork. And that is something that I have not still grasped. Like, for me, sailing is your own sport. Like, you do it by yourself. But then now I'm at the URI sailing team, and we're a team, Like, I would definitely say that I'm someone who likes to work alone. And sailing has just brought this whole other side of teamwork, which is honestly great because now in academic life, I can work with teams even though they don't respond to my texts, like whatever. But like sailing is just you work with a team. If someone's not happy, you got to make them happy. It's obviously not going to be like everyone's happy. Some people are going to be disappointed, but we're trying to get a medium where kind of everyone's in the same ballpark. But basically, you need to know a lot about rules and tactics. And I think people just think sailing is like, cruising on a yacht with a wine in your hand and like a cheese board. Whereas like sailing is so much more than that. It's statistics, it's data, it's, mentally and physically draining. And like mentally, it's insane. I've come off the water bawling my eyes out because I just can't understand what the wind is doing. And just the fact that like I'm so into it is just insane to me. Like I don't understand how like it just affects me so much. But that might be my competitive side coming out, or it's just me being, a wuss, but whatever. But to get into sailing, like how I got into sailing, my brothers, my family. I don't think I've known someone who has gotten into sailing just because they're like, oh my God, let's just do competitive sailing for fun, It's your family has basically forced it on you. And that's what honestly I think my family did. I hated it. Obviously that story of the thunderstorm literally scarred me for life, but my mom didn't force me, but heavily encouraged me to go out again because it was a little lighter winds that day. So I feel like if I didn't go out that day after, I would have never continued sailing. But since that day, I've just been so in love with sailing and how it just influences me in everyday life and just other sailors. Like you yourself are your role. Like for me, I'm my own role model, but everyone else, like going out there sailing for literally 8 hours a day. I was 8 years old. We would go out for 8 hours. Like it's insane. And I don't even want to get started on the parents of this sport. I'm sure every single, sport has their pushy parents, but I believe sailing has the most pushy parents in the world. Like I will not even start, Mark.
Well, we have a lot of time to go through all of this because that was a lot. But it sounds like that discipline is a main factor in really being successful when it comes to sailing, and something that was probably instilled at you at a young age. Obviously, your parents just kind of throwing you into the fire and getting you into sailing at a young age. But, I mean, so looking back at your career resume, you've traveled a lot. Obviously, coming from Ireland and being immersed in just sort of that European culture of sailing and taking, like, obviously learning in Miami from a young age and then just traveling around the world competing in sailing. Just as you've grown with sailing being a part of your life, just tell me, what were some of like the coolest experiences that you were able to go through as a part of a sailing team and just traveling the world and being able to sail?
Of course. I definitely think sailing is a cool experience itself. Competitive sailing is completely out of this world. It's a different experience. But as Mark mentioned, I do come from Ireland. My mom is Irish and my dad is American. And so I've basically lived in Ireland my whole life. After Florida, we moved back to Ireland. And since the standard of sailing in America is insanely high, like insane, we came back to Ireland and we ended up doing really well because the standard in a small little island like Ireland is completely different to America. So we came back, we kind of, I wouldn't say we crushed it. My brother definitely did. My oldest brother, he's awesome. He crushed it. We came back. Me and my other brother were kind of just like the two younger siblings to the, national champion, which is my brother. And so, like, that in itself, sailing in Ireland is amazing. I think the structure and the association they have there is such a welcoming program, and like I've coached sailing basically my whole life, and I think that a lot of foreign people come in to Ireland to sail and stuff, and the welcomeness is just insane. And so that's what we felt, and that was really cool. But with regards to the cool places that I've sailed, I feel like I've been everywhere. Like, sailing requires so much training and practice, and it's not a sport that, like, you can just do, like, out of the blue. You really have to train for it, and that involves fitness, that involves being on the water. Time on the water is so important, and I'm sure it's like that for other sports, just time on the field or wherever. And so I like to think as, like, I was talking about this earlier, how running and swimming and cycling is its own sport, whereas, like, sailing, to train to sail, you have to run, cycle, swim, do all of those things to be able to build strength, to be able to perform at a maximum level or at a level you would desire. And so I feel like with all those, you really need to commit to sailing. And so I actually ended up, I wouldn't say skipping a year. I ended up taking a gap year when I was 16 years old to pursue the youth worlds in Guinea, and that's where I sailed in Poland. So Poland was an insane location. What happened was every single sailor from around the world that was the best in their division came to this venue to sail. And so we were put up in a hotel. We met all from literally 58 different countries. We met the best sailors, which was insane. It's like, like, you're just, like, in love with everyone. You're like, oh my gosh, tell me how to do this, like the different techniques that they use in sailing. It's just awesome. And you're just filled with everyone in the room just knowing probably a little more than you do. And, like, it's just amazing. And the venue wasn't great because the wind was too light. I'm not great in light wind, but just being there and being involved with like-minded individuals is such an amazing experience.
Was it a tournament of people of your age, or was it did it include a number of people that were, like, just teenagers, young adults, or was it people that have been sailing for, like, 20 years? Like, what was the field looking like?
So this was the youth worlds, so everyone had to be under the age of 18 or 23. Not sure.
Well, but a youth Olympics sort of thing.
Yes, it was a youth Olympics sort of vibe, and that was there was different fleets. There was mixed fleets, which is boy and girl or boy and boy, and then there was female fleets, which was solely female. And in that range, it was mostly people on the more aged side, like I would say either 18 to 20 years old, but it was definitely mainly people who were already really, really good, and they were just going again for the second time to, like, sail again.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And I mean, just what were the results coming out of that tournament? I mean, just for you, I saw in 2019 you did it 19th overall.
Yeah.
In the overall tournament. I mean, how big was the field? You said it was 58 different countries, but how many representatives from each country were there?
There was quite a lot. I don't remember the exact number, but because I've been to so many events, I cannot even remember how, like, there's been ranges of, like, 400 to 10, But this event, I think I remember it was our very first event in a big field like this. I was 16 years old up against, 20-year-olds in the boat. And this, like, honestly leads into the slight unfairness of sailing. which is a very controversial topic. But you're up against these very, very big and bulky, 20-year-olds, and I'm a 16-year-old girl, right? It's just like I feel so small and little, and when the wind gets big, like, what am I doing? Like, how is it even fair that I'm struggling, I'm killing myself to keep this boat down when there's people literally sitting in the boat, So the range was very, very big, and there was, the range of skill was insane. So overall, it was probably the most amazing experience I've ever experienced, just because of how diverse the field was, and the different, I like to see how other people sail in different countries, and you get that point of view when you're there, when you're sailing, and you see, oh, they do this like that, like the different skills. But I think it was just such an amazing experience just to be able to be there.
And kind of before we get into the physical side of sailing, because that in and of itself seems quite interesting, because I'm curious to see the comparisons between how your frame and just your ability stacks up against some of the other guys, even at URI, because you were talking about just how it's very team oriented at URI and so on. But looking back at some of your previous experiences before the Poland tournament, and I mean, going back all the way to 2014, you were sailing competitively. At what point, as you were going through your sailing journey, let's call it, did you realize that this was something that I'm going to do competitively going forward, into university and into that nature? Because obviously, in Europe, sports and education is a lot more separate than it is in the United States. So, I mean, I'm just curious, living out there and doing so much in Europe, how was that decision-making process like for you?
So, sailing when I was growing up was definitely something that I took a lot of pride in, just being able to do a sport that I loved and, in my opinion, do well in, and be able to, be a role model to other people. I think that, I wanted to be able to, make myself proud, if that makes sense. You do this sport and you're like, wow, I can actually really do well. And so I feel in every sport there's someone who they do it and they're thinking okay, this can actually be a career path for me. And that's what I was thinking. And after every regatta, my parents would be like, wow, Leah, you actually did really good. And I'd be like, okay, maybe I want to take the next step. Maybe I want to start actually really committing to this. And so, as I told you, I took a gap year when I was 16 years old, and I pursued sailing for that entire year. Now, during that year, I don't know how many countries I went to, but it was over 20 countries in Europe. I spent a week there. I sailed with people around the world, and it was such, the environment was, I would say, it's insane. You have to be so committed to be able to compete at this level. I was getting up at the crack of dawn to be able to go out so I can sail 9 hours on the water, come back, go on a bike ride with your teammates and get fit, And so just in to be able to think about that and just be okay, I really want to commit to this is just it's a whole other conversation that you have to have. You have to be prepared for, the long nights, the disappointment, I think resilience is something that I've definitely built along my whole entire career. There are times where you lose on national titles just because you make one wrong move. And then you go home, you're like, wow, I could have made that, I could have done that. Actually, a funny story, when I was qualifying for the Youth Worlds, it was a qualification. And we, not only did we have to qualify within our country, we had to qualify within the UK as well. And England has an insane, they have insane sailors. They're going to the Olympics, right? And I'm up against these girls who've gone to this Youth Worlds platform 5 times, right? And so I'm competing against this. We're at a regatta, we're nervous. This is our chance, our 1 out of 2 chances. We sail, it was a rough day the first day. Second day was even worse. We came out, we didn't make it, right? And that was one of our only chances to make this Youth Worlds. And I had taken a year off. And I was thinking, oh my God, I can't do this. Like, you know, what am I going to do now? I just wasted a whole year and I didn't even make what I wanted to, right? Then April comes around, the final qualification, and, you know, I've prepared for months, you know, eating healthily, training every single day, getting up at 6 a.m., going to the gym, cycling, you know, everything. And it comes down to this moment where I have to qualify, right? And so this regatta is 5 days, right? It's not just a 1 day, okay, you do this and you're out, you know? So it's like a 5 day, you have to pace yourself. You have to eat correctly, sleep correctly. You cannot be up later than 12 a.m. or like it's just over for you. You know, you need to have all the strength you can. And so race after race, we were just counting our points, just making sure we were keeping calm. You know, we were the lightest boat out there. It was heavy winds. We tried our best. We stayed with the fleet, you know, and what do you know, we make it, you know? And it was such like a relief. Like everything that you've done up to this point has led you to this moment, and it was the best feeling ever. And I think that I can speak for all like sports teams and sports persons that like all of the hard work that you just did and for your whole entire life has come to this moment, and like you're just so proud of yourself. And I think at that moment I was just like, that's the exact moment where I'm like, this is why I do my sport, you know, this is why I love my sport.
That's fascinating. I mean, like, I'm like sitting here as you're doing this trying to picture in my head what that sort of race looks like in a sense. And I mean, you said 5 days of the event lasted for a total of 5 days. How many races in that period did you participate in?
So there was 14 races. Okay, I'm completely eyeballing this, but usually I think I remember that there was at least like 12 to 14 races as a qualifier. And so you get put into fleets, your own individual boat. There's 2 people in the boat. You get put into your own fleets, and then you race for 3 days, right? The top like 40 maybe or 50 get put into Gold Fleet, and so on and so on. And then basically when you're in Gold Fleet, you're up against the best sailors in the country and in like wherever else who have come anywhere else. And basically you're just racing for what you want. And like if you want first, you're racing for first. If you want second, you know, obviously everyone wants to win, but only one person can. So you need to be focused. Races can change. You can come first. You can be coming first in one part of the race and then becoming dead last in another part of the race. It's so like quick, you know. And when you're last, you have to build that resilience. You have to be like, okay, I'm coming last right now. I still have a chance. You know, this is the mental part of racing, which I don't think like most people have got down. Honestly, I don't think I've got it down yet, but I'm working on it. I think that it's just the mentality of having to finish that race, even if you're in last place, and go do another race and try your best. And that's something that actually happened. We came last, like dead last in a race, and I went up to my coach. I was crying. I was like, I don't know what to do. Like, we're not going to be able to make it. Like, what do we do? And I was with my crew. Her name's Emer. She was great. And you know, we were just getting frustrated at each other. And it's at that point where it's like, no, it's your fault. No, it's your fault. You know, we're not doing things right. The communication is not working. We're not synchronized and stuff. And then, you know, that's when my resilience kicked in. And I'm like, you know what? I've worked too hard for this. I'm not going to let it slip just because one race went bad. So we went out there and we did it. And that's it. I think, like, that's the moment. Like, if I really hadn't snapped out of that, it would have all been gone. I would have lost it all. I wouldn't have been able to go to Poland. I would have just wasted a whole year of my life doing nothing, basically.
So then, with the fact that you were able to be successful in these events and qualify for such massive tournaments like the one in Poland, what made you want to come back here? I mean, it seems as if, from my understanding, that you were able to do so much traveling and really be competitive as part of a team out in Europe. So then what made you decide, all right, we're going to come back to the United States? And then furthermore, what then led you to deciding to come to URI? Because I mean, from my limited knowledge of sailing in the United States. It's not one of those major Division I sports in the NCAA. But, I mean, from what I'm seeing, there are other schools that are bigger than URI that offer sailing that probably would be like bigger markets and have maybe more to offer in terms of other things outside of athletics. So, I mean, just like what led to those two decisions? A, to come back to the U.S., and then B, to settle down at URI?
Yeah, so URI as a school was great, but I'll talk about Europe first. So I was in Europe, or more specifically Ireland, and the sailing scene is great and stuff, and it's, it helped me experience and learn all these different things, but looking into the future, Ireland doesn't have a more like college-like feel, especially when it comes to sailing. It's more of a sailing fun. Like, you go there and you have fun with your friends. It's not competitive at all. I would honestly say it's more recreational sailing. My brother would argue because he's the commodore of the sailing team in Ireland. So, but it's just not competitive for me. Like, I've grown up immersed in these regattas every single weekend, and that's just not what they were going to give me. So my dad is from America, and he would tell me all these stories. He went to MIT, and he told me all these stories about, how competitive America is, and how he would do all these sports and how he'd race all the time. And that's the life I wanted. I wanted to be able to put my sport and sail and be competitive and just do what I wanted to do with the people that wanted to do it with me. So Ireland was not the kind of vibe that I liked, so I decided to move to America for college. I ended up going to St. Mary's College of Maryland for my first year of college, and I was on the sailing team. I was recruited, and it just wasn't a great feel for me just because the location, it was like a little out of the norm of what I'm used to. Because I grew up in a more suburban area. Well, this is way rural. Even though URI is quite rural, this was insane. So I ended up transferring here. And I have to say, the URI sailing team is amazing. Like, it is, like, sailing is not classified as a D1 sport. Therefore, we don't really get as much recognition as, let's say, football, volleyball, soccer, all that stuff. But URI sailing team has incredible competitive excellence. And it's evident. It's evident through the alumni and through, the 26 All-Americans that we had at Rhode Island. But we compete in the New England area. So we compete at Harvard, MIT, Yale, Tufts, all those really good schools. Although we're not a varsity team, we're a club team. So we don't get the same advantages as they do. They get all their funding through the college and stuff, and we have to fund for ourselves, which is completely fine. Like, we're the underdog in this situation, and we're doing just fine. For the fall of 2023, we were 9th in the Open and 9th in the women's. Like, that is, in my opinion, is incredible. We're put with a team. It's a completely new team. There's members leaving. There's members coming. Our coach, Yoakum, who had to step in because he's a new coach this year, but he's done an excellent job at just managing the team and putting their best foot forward. So, in general, like, URI has just been such an amazing environment, and the sailing team has such a welcoming field. And anyone who wants to join URI sailing, of course, we're always open to having new participants, but just in general, it's such an amazing vibe.
And so, I mean, you kind of touched on it a second ago, talking about how the program's produced 27 All-Americans. URI Sailing's been a part of URI for almost 100 years, and it's historically one of the most successful programs in URI athletic history. And that's coupled with the fact that it is a club team, and many people who have listened to the show consistently know that I work with the Rhode Island men's club lacrosse team, and we've talked numerous times on the show about just how club teams are set up, how they're student-funded, and there's no oversight or true oversight from the university or the NCAA in the same sense where there's a lot of support from the university. There's obviously like club sports here at URI that is the, I guess, de facto school governing body for these teams. But a lot of them are self-sufficient, and it's how these teams are able to be competitive because of just the will of their participants. So it's fairly interesting to see a program like that that's been around for decades upon decades upon decades that still, it's just, there's never been a lack of success with the program. And it's interesting to see programs like that are able to be so successful without a real true following in a way. Because I mean, like, I've been here now for 3 years, and I can say that most people really don't realize that URI necessarily is a sailing team, or if they do, they don't realize how competitive it is. Because we're all told the first day of freshman year that, oh, you can sail for credit, you can take a sailing class, you can join the sailing team and do stuff at the Bay campus at URI in Narragansett Bay. But I feel like a lot of people aren't truly, I guess, aware of the stature that the program has in regards to other programs at URI. And so, I mean, like, when you were deciding to transfer, obviously, you're looking at the entire university as a whole, but were you learning about the history of the program and how big of just, I guess, the aura of the program was it in your decision to join?
So yeah, that was another thing that I was a little worried about when I was looking at transferring. I was thinking, URI sailing team is a club sport, right? It's not regarded as highly as it was back in my old college. And so I was thinking, like, I'm going to have to pay dues. I'm going to have to, get my own places and stuff. And, it just didn't seem like something that I would like and that I would want to fund. And first day I went for the pre-training, it was amazing. I was like, this doesn't act like a club sport, like a club team. This acts like a varsity competitive team. The competitiveness that I feel when I'm with the URI sailing team, it's a good kind of competitive. It's just amazing how people from all around the state or all around the country just come together and we just sail together and we just have fun, and it's a mixture of fun and competitiveness. But obviously, sailing drew me to this school, as well as I was originally a computer science major, sorry. And I wanted to study computer science with data science and get into all of that. But then I realized, like, it's really not for me. My dad is a computer scientist. So are my 2 older brothers. They are amazing at it. They're all geniuses. My mom is a chemist. She's also very, very smart. She taught me everything in chemistry, so shout out to her. But I just realized this is not what I wanted to do. So then I decided, okay, let's look around the school. And the College of Business was amazing. It's Rhode Island's top undergrad business. And so I began taking classes, and now I'm currently a business analytics and intelligence major, and the advising, all the career fairs have been amazing. I'm currently trying to get into this business fraternity, and everything at URI is amazing, all the involvement that we get. But I would say that URI sailing is probably one of my favorite club sport, even though I don't even think it's a club sport. It's my whole life, but it's probably one of the best clubs that I've been in anywhere in the world.
Are there a lot of people in a similar situation to you that have, like, traveled from far places to come compete for the club team here?
Yes, there are 2 Turkish sailors on the team as well. Very, very good sailors. Everyone's a great sailor, but they came also from Europe, like me. And I'm not very well versed where everyone is from, but I think the rest of them are from within America. But our head coach is actually from Norway, and I definitely appreciate the different culture that we get. He has coached many, many different areas in America and I think Norway. But just being able to get his point of view and his impressions on different, skills and levels and different techniques, I think is an amazing skill to have, especially as a coach. Being able to have experiences from sailors and I guess parents is great. So I feel like we have such an advantage with him as a coach, just to be able to learn.
Interesting. And so I feel like now we've gotten a good grasp on just the discipline involved in sailing, a little bit of your history, your background, and then just what the URI sailing program has to offer. But what I really want to understand now is I want to get an understanding of what it actually takes to do this. Because this seems like an incredibly demanding sport, one both mentally and physically. And I mean, you've alluded to it, just like how vastly different boats can be, and like the competition that you face, just considering the size of other people that do it and so on. I mean, just like, I know it's a little bit vague, but I mean, can you just walk me through what a typical race looks like for you? Okay. Either one that you've done in Europe or one that you've done here at URI, but just like, what does a typical race look like for you?
Okay, well, all races are very similar, not in like tactics wise, just in general, the format of it. You have a fleet race and then you have a team race. So a fleet race is you're sailing individually with, you're just like, there's two people in a boat and you sail for your boat. Team racing involves 3 boats, and in total 6 people, because there's 2 people in each boat. And the goal there is to try and get the perfect combination within each boat about who finishes wherever, to get the perfect combination to win the race. Whereas fleet racing, which is what I've done my whole life, is you yourself, either in a 2-man boat or a single-handed boat, you're getting across the course in the smallest amount of time ahead of everyone else. We don't really measure time for sailing. Like, it's not, oh, you have to get there within an hour or something. It's, although there are time limits, if you take too long, then you're going to get disqualified. But it's just, you are putting what you know about sailing and your skill out on the course. Now, what I mean by a course is there are certain marks that sometimes you'll see them on the water. They're just colorful balloons that float. They're anchored to the floor so they won't move. And then you have a starting line and a finishing line. There are different setups for the course. This will not make sense to any non-sailor, so you'll have to bear with me. But there's courses that are either just you go up and down a bunch of times, or you go in different shapes like a triangle or a trapezoid. And there's different points of sail. There's 3, or I guess 4 kind of, but the 3 main courses of sail are a beat, which happens when you're going upwind, which is when you're going towards the wind, a reach when you're going across, so like horizontal to the wind, and then a downwind, which is when you're going the complete opposite, like 180 from where the wind is coming from. And so the sailing rules like to implement all 3 of those into sailing and their sailing course, although it doesn't happen a lot in college sailing. Normally you just go up and down a couple times and we'll call it a day. But in my, like, where I've learned, there, like, sailing is so complicated that there's different boats that can only go specific directions, and the boats that I've sailed have been difficult, and so you can only go certain directions. Like, you're supposed to go downwind, but you can't go downwind because you have to go reach to reach to reach, which is not making any sense, I know, but yeah, we can try and figure it out. But like, mentally it's extremely exhausting, because it's like if you're in a race, like a running race, and you see someone pass you and you're like, oh my god, now I can't run, like I don't know how to run anymore, you know. And you're thinking, okay, now they're better than me, so I know they're better than me, and what are they gonna do? Like, are they gonna run faster than me? You know, you're thinking all these things. And that's the exact same in sailing. You have someone pass you and you're like, oh my god, now I have to strategize, and then you end up focusing on that boat and you forget about all the other boats, and it just ends badly. So the mental aspect of sailing is super important. Being able to sail your own race instead of someone else's is a key that I still haven't learned. You know, you're always like, you have to think about yourself as well as everyone else, but not in the same way that you think about yourself. You have to, in your peripherals, you have to know, okay, that boat's there, but you yourself, you have to sail your own race. You can't copy what someone else is doing. You know, it's not like, you know, the technique that you have will be completely different to everyone else's. And then physically, that is extremely difficult. So everyone understands that some days are windy, some days like there's no wind, and the windy days can be a disadvantage to people who are light, like me. Like I'm tiny, I'm 5'4". You know, I weigh 100 and whatever pounds, and then I'm up against these people who weigh probably 200 pounds or something, and it's like how is this fair that this person doesn't even have to move out to flatten the boat, right? Whereas I have to kill myself to bring my body out and you know, get soaking wet and, you know, struggle with everything because I'm too light and too weak to kind of do this. And then there's another aspect of when it's super light winds and you have me who gets an advantage because I'm tiny and the boat moves so much faster. Then you have these 200-pound people who are just stuck there and they just have to fend for themselves and they have to not get frustrated. Personally, I've never had that issue just because, like, with my body physique, it's just I've been able to, you know, move in any wind, right? But I've never had that frustration of being too big for the boat. And so I bless God for that, but it's very, very difficult. And that also stems, like, mentally, it hurts. Like, seeing people pass you in very, very light winds, it's not a great feeling.
I feel like I probably should have asked this earlier, but I mean, are a lot of these races co-ed, or are there, like, different, like, are there different, like, weight classes for some of these events? Because, I mean, from what you're explaining to me, it seems like at some races you're at a severe disadvantage, or in other races you're at like a critical advantage over other competitors. So I mean, are there like women's flights? Like, are there like co-ed flights? Like how does that work?
So yeah, so basically there has been a split now to make it more fair, so that co-ed is men and women, and like women's is just women. They did this because obviously weight is, like, I don't know if a lot of sailors think weight is important, but to me weight is incredibly important. You know, like if I'm against, you know, these massive men, you know, 2 men versus 2 women in heavy winds, the men are gonna win. I just think that's, like, biologically, you know, like the men just have more muscle. They you know, they're bigger, they can keep the boat down. And then you have these 2 little women who are, like, you know, struggling to keep the boat down and stuff. And with sailing comes boat handling, and that's the way you're able to handle the boat in any wind. And boat handling becomes difficult in heavy weather. So when it gets windy and you cannot, like, get boat handling down, you're not going to be able to sail well, because you're not even going to be able to handle the boat. You won't be able to know what's going on. And whereas these men will have an advantage, then if they can handle the boat, then they're just thinking about, okay, where do we go on the course, right? And so that, I think, is what they did. I think they split it so that co-ed can race against each other, so that it's fairer for the women to be able to race against, like, each other. The same weight range. So they don't split us by weight, they split us by gender.
Interesting. And so then going more into the direction of the actual races themselves, when you talk about some of those courses where it's like, all right, some days you're just racing, you're going up and down a few times, back and forth. I mean, to put it in more of terms that maybe more Americans would understand in terms of, like, actual, like, motor car racing, like NASCAR and F1 in that regard, what are the more, like, common types of courses that you would see? Like, would you see a lot of courses that are similarly set up in like a Formula One sort of way, where it's like you've got more courses that involve a lot of, like, turning and a lot of movement like that, or are a good deal of them just more, like, straightforward, like you go straight up, straight back, straight up, straight back, straight up, straight back a few times?
I think the goal of these sailing courses is to be able to implement all 3 points of sail into the race, so that you can test out, or I guess perform your best off of what you've practiced in practice. And so, like, in college sailing specifically, it's different everywhere, but specifically in college sailing, you have fleet racing and you have team racing. In fleet racing, it's mainly up and down. So you go up, you go down, you go back up, you go back down, and then you go through the finish line. For team racing, it's a specific set course, and it's not going to change. So for fleet racing, you can interchange from different ones. You can do a triangle, which is up, across, down, up, across, down. And then there's another one with the trapezoid is up, across, down, across, up. You know, it's complicated, but for team racing, it's a set course where it's up, across, down, across, up, right? It's not that hard to learn just because you know, like, okay, this is the next mark that I'm going to. A mark is a buoy, not you. But yeah, so it's like, I wouldn't say it's the same as F1 just because there's a lot of like different, you know, routes, but and it's a completely different field, but I would say that it's very repetitive in what they present to the sailors.
And so then when it comes to the team races, I know you talked about with the fleet ones where it's like, all right, you're a boat of one or two people and you want to be the first one across. But with the team one, is it the fastest combined time?
So team racing is actually, it's not about the time, it's about the combination of the finish. So for example, if you're on a team purple, and then there's team green, and if the first purple boat gets the 2 first finishes and they cross the line first, like 1 and 2, then they win automatically. And just from that, for like it's 3-on-3. So there's 6 boats altogether. Where you place within those 6 boats determines who wins, right? So there's different combinations for a win. There's a 1-2 whatever, like as in the first 2 boats of the same team cross the line first and second, and then the last boat can go wherever because, you know, they've already won because they got a 1-2. And then there's other combinations like a 2-3-4 where they win because the first one is the other team, the second, third, and fourth is the same team, and then the fifth and sixth is the team that finished first. So then you have that combination where the middle team wins. So it's just about the combinations that you can make with your boats. It's not about time or anything. I don't think sailing is about time at all. The only time there is within sailing is a time limit, where it's super light wind and no one's moving and no one finishes, or like the last boat finishes way out of the time limit, then they get disqualified. But that's the only thing about time, and then it's just purely off of placement.
Has that happened where you've had regattas and races where no boats have been able to finish?
Yes. Some colleges do a good job at abandoning the race before they finish because they realize these boats aren't going to cross the line or the finish line, so they abandon it. Other really, really mean colleges have us sit out there and wait until the time limit comes, and then they're like, okay, guys, you can come back down, which is a waste of time in my opinion. But sometimes, like, wind, you cannot really predict the wind. You know, there's, you know, wind forecasts, and you can base your racing off of that and strategy, but in the end, you don't know what's going to happen. The wind might die, which means that there's no wind, and then there might be a massive squall and gust of a lot of wind, and, you know, it's just, like, so unpredictable. So it's like, you know, you never really know what's going to happen, but you can tailor your skills to what's on the course right now.
And so then I was looking back at just the schedule from the fall of 2023, and the amount of races that I saw were just insane. Because for some reason, to me, it seems like this is something that you would have, like, to dedicate a lot of energy to and have a bit of a cool down in between. But it seems like you guys were racing every single weekend, and maybe even multiple times, like, during a week. I mean, just that impressive in and of itself. But I was curious, just, like, what were some of, like, the highlights of your fall season? Like, what were some tournaments that you loved? Like, what were some races and courses that you loved participating in? So, like, just what were some of your personal highlights?
Yeah, to answer your first question, we sail basically every weekend as much as we can. And we also sailed during the week, 4 days a week, Tuesday to Friday. Obviously, if you can't make it, you don't go because you have class, and that's understandable. But for the regattas that we did, we like to travel kind of all over, mainly the East Coast, like the Northeast, but sometimes there's some regattas down in Maryland, in Charleston and stuff. We also have an offshore team. I'm not entirely sure about that, but it's integrated with the sailing team. They go to more big boat stuff, and they work as a bigger team, and they've done an amazing job. They recently went down to College of Charleston, and they won that regatta. So they're an awesome team too, but we all like kind of have the meeting together. And so we went to Harvard, and I don't know, in my opinion, I love the Charles River. A lot of people say that it's the worst venue ever because it's so unpredictable, but I think that's the fun about it. Like, you never know what's going to happen. You can go from first to last in a second. Like, I'm not kidding you, a second. It's insane. And so I think, in my opinion, that's the most amazing venue. And there's the College Nationals, Sailing Nationals, will be held there this in May, so like at the start of the summer. So that's what everyone's practicing for. And so, in my opinion, Harvard is Harvard, MIT, like the Charles River area is amazing, and you have all the buildings. It's beautiful. But yeah.
And so then, obviously, because of like weather conditions are never truly the same after each race. But I mean, I'm curious if you feel this. Do you believe that the more you do the same like event year in, year out, or the more times you do a particular course, you're able to get an expertise on how to successfully navigate it regardless of the conditions at hand?
Yeah. So there's a lot of venues like that, actually, in sailing, college sailing, and sailing in general. An example I have is Lake Garda in Italy. There's this massive mountain, right? And the strategy there is you go to the right as soon as possible, because once you hit that right shift, which is a specific wind pattern that'll take you higher than most boats, which will lead you to the mark better and faster. Once you get there, then you're winning, basically. And so that is kind of one venue that everyone knows about, that it's like you go right, that's it. Harvard, like MIT, Harvard, the Charles River is like, I don't think no matter how much you sail on it, it'll never really stay the same. You're always getting random gusts and puffs. But like when you sail down in College, there's an insane amount of current, which is just like when the water is just like rushing and it's pushing the boat like a different direction. So there, like I believe that you can get as much experience as you want, but I don't think you'll ever be an expert in a specific venue.
Interesting. So we're kind of running toward the end of our time, but I want to hear from you one more thing. For everybody listening that is listening to it live or will listen later when I publish this elsewhere, that are interested about Rhode Island Sailing, what are things that you would like Rhodey fans to know about the team and what to expect from the team this year?
I think that the URI Sailing team is such an exceptional, amazing cohort of people. They are so supportive in anything that anyone does. They are such a family. They live in a little kind of area south of Rhode Island. It's called Matunuck, and they all have their little village down there. And I've been down there, and it's such a warming feeling. Everyone on the team is so nice and just supportive in whatever you do. Like, you can get an A on an exam, and they'll like cheer you on and stuff. It's just a nice feeling. Sailing wise, they are incredible. Everyone there is such a great sailor, and they're hungry and they're driven for more. Our coach Joachim has stepped up as the main coach, the head coach, and being new in the fall, it's been so great to see us kind of bond together as a team as well as with our coach. And so anyone who would like to join sailing and is thinking about it, I think it's such a great opportunity to be able to travel and meet new people, and in general just for networking, like being able to know all these different people who have become such amazing sailors from this specific university and establishment. I think it's just awesome.
All right. Well, Leah, thank you for joining the show today. This was exceptionally interesting. I'm honestly
I'm so glad.
I'm overall just really fascinated about this team, and I mean, like, your history was very fascinating as well, because I mean, just like, you see a lot of international athletes coming in and like learning about their experiences to coming to little old Rhode Island to come play is fairly interesting. But I mean, sailing is another sport that a lot of people don't really know about, but it's a team that other people should. So I feel like that as time goes on, that sort of fandom is only going to grow as they get more personalities like yourself to join the team and people with expertise like you do. But I mean, just again, thank you for coming on. I really, really do appreciate it.
Yes, I thank you guys so much for having me, Mark. You're an amazing host. Everyone listen to his stuff. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it. Well, thank you all for everybody for listening this week. Going to be looking into some more guests for next week and beyond with spring break coming up. Going to be figuring out what the schedule for the show is going to look like moving forward. But as always, stay in the loop for updates on Marks Remarks Pod on Instagram and Twitter for all of that information. And obviously, if you guys want to learn more about Rhode Island Sailing, take a look on the socials and URI Club Sports website, because it's a team that definitely deserves more views. So thank you all for listening, and we'll see you next week.